When the Republic's clone army was formed, a unique problem presented itself. How would it be led by the Jedi? And over the course of the war, a unique command structure would be formed. In today's video, I will break down exactly how this Republic command structure worked and who led who, starting from the top with Chancellor Palpatine and working all the way down to individual squad leaders of clone troopers.
For the Republic!
Before we can fully understand who led who, we have to understand what the ranks were and positions within the Republic military. Now, the Republic military was broken down into many different parts and many different sections. However, at its base, you had the clone troopers. Now, clone trooper ranks have changed a lot throughout the years, but currently in canon, you have clone cadets, clone privates, clone corporals, clone sergeants, clone lieutenants, clone captains, clone majors, clone commanders, and clone marshal commanders. Now, there are also some clone ranks within the Navy, like clone navigation officers, as well as clone admirals, clone rear admirals, and both the Navy and the Army shared ranks like commander, captain, lieutenant, and corporal. Finally, for the clones, you had the special forces like the ARC troopers and the clone commandos. However, this is a bit of a weird one. See, ARC troopers were seemingly sharing the ranks of normal clone troopers, while clone commandos seem to specifically have captains and sergeants leading them, but it's unclear what the standard or base level rank for commandos and ARC troopers were. Now, the other very large component of the Grand Army of the Republic were the Jedi. Now, the Jedi had three distinct ranks. You had the High Jedi Generals, which were sometimes but not always members of the Jedi Council, but were always Jedi Masters. Then you had Jedi Generals, who were a mix of Jedi Knights and Jedi Masters. Again, some could be on the Jedi Council, but not always. And then finally, you had Jedi Commanders, which were almost always Padawans. However, the military did have a few outliers within it, including non-clone officers on the ground. And these typically held the rank of Master Chief, Colonel, Brigadier General, or General. Now, very rarely did we see these forces actually being used on the ground, but it did happen on occasion, primarily in Legends though. Some examples in canon would be the trainers on Kamino or Colonel Gaskin. Likewise, the Navy also had a number of non-clone officers, and they were actually more famous. And here they held the ranks of Rear Admiral, Admiral, Commander, Lieutenant, and Captain. And this is primarily what we think of when we think of non-clone officers serving the Republic. Nonetheless, now that we have the ranks established, we can understand how it all fits together in the command structure. At the top of the command structure for both the Navy and the Grand Army of the Republic, you had the Supreme Chancellor, or for the Clone Wars, Palpatine, as he acted as the Commander-in-Chief. Following this, you also had the Jedi High Council, or commonly referred to as the Jedi Council, which was made up of Jedi Masters and Grand Masters. Now, these positions are often listed as co-leaders of both military branches, but it's likely one had more power over the other depending on the situation. Now, serving as the second in command or the second rung on the ladder would be the Republic High Command or Republic Strategic Command. This was again the second in command for both the Army and the Navy and was comprised of admirals and generals from across both branches. However, it's worth mentioning that the Jedi did have some representation here. Specifically, their main representative was Oppa Rancisis. Now, once you get past Republic High Command, the structure breaks into the two branches. So you have a dedicated Army structure and a dedicated Navy structure. And I have a video that breaks down both of them that I'll tag to this video. However, to start with the Army, it was broken down into a number of different levels. It started with system armies, which were led by Jedi High Generals. Each of these system armies had two sector armies within them, which again were led by a Jedi High Council member, or a Jedi Council member. Those were further broken down into 4 corps, which were co-led by a clone marshal commander and a Jedi general. Those corps were broken down into legions, which could be led by a Jedi general or a clone commander, sometimes both, but not always. Those were further broken down into 4 regiments, which were led by Jedi commanders or clone commanders. Those were then broken down into 4 battalions, which were led by Jedi generals or clone commanders. Those were then broken down into 4 companies, which were led by clone captains. Companies were then broken into 4 platoons, led by a clone lieutenant. Those were then broken down into squads, which were led by clone sergeants. And obviously, each level of the structure and each rank in each level of the structure would report to the one above them. Now, there are a certain number of notes and exceptions we need to talk about here. The first would be non-clone officers taking over certain levels of the clones when needed. Now, this did not always happen, and it very rarely happened in canon, but it did occasionally happen. Additionally, the ranks of clone corporal and clone major do not have a clear position within canon for the ranking hierarchy. Now, some sources like to organize them as I presented them earlier in the video. However, as far as I understand it, they do not have any confirmed position within the hierarchy. So it's easy to just go off of real-life examples or Legends information. Now, there's also a few weird anomalies within the structure too, like the clone commandos. Now, clone commando squads are said to be led by sergeants, but as we know, Gregor was a clone captain who led his group of clone commandos called Foxtrot Group, not Foxtrot Squad. Now this could just be a simple case of names being weird or whatever, but it does appear that Gregor has a different level of responsibilities compared to a normal clone commando sergeant. But again, none of this is exactly documented. Another really important note is senators and Republic representatives, as we know that they would have command over clones. Now this is best seen when the clones of the Coruscant Guard are escorting Senator Karis and Representative Binks to the planet of Florum. During this time, the senator passes away and Representative Binks is given command over the clones despite a clone commander being there. Now this could just be an anomaly for the Coruscant Guard, but I do think it is worth mentioning. Now on the naval side, there was a structure to be broken down, and once again I break that down in my Republic structure video. But in terms of the ranking hierarchy, it was pretty simple. Admirals had the most power, but there were commanders, captains, and rear admirals that all fell somewhere in the mix. It is likely that it went admiral, rear admiral, commander, lieutenant, and captain, but none of this is actually confirmed. To clarify something, this is only in canon. In Legends, we have a very detailed structure, but it's seemingly missing from canon due to the decanonization of the source that established it, that source being the Essential Guide to Warfare. In Legends, the hierarchy was very simple. An armada was led by a high Jedi general. Under armadas, we had fleets led by fleet admirals. Under fleets, we had battle groups led by admirals or Jedi generals. Under that, we had a squadron, which was led by a commodore or a Jedi general. And then we had a section, which was led by a senior captain or a Jedi commander. And then there was an element which was just one ship, and this was led by a captain. But again, this sadly does not exist in canon. But it is worth noting that the non-clone officers usually had the upper levels of command compared to the clone commanders. However, the clone ranks, including clone commanders, could lead entire vessels or fleets in some cases. Now, the Jedi had a very interesting dynamic with the naval structure, because technically the Jedi did outrank all naval officers. This included non-clone and clone officers. But the Jedi often allowed them to lead on their own because their knowledge and expertise was far better than that of the Jedi. Now, this also allowed for the Jedi to rapidly deploy with the ground forces or starfighter forces and command them as needed, while the officers could stay on the bridge of the ship and lead the fleets. Now, it did not happen often, but there were some cases where naval forces and higher level naval officers were on the ground with ground forces. But of course, command still fell to the Jedi and usually still fell to the clone leaders of the ground forces. But it's never clearly stated, and again, it's another anomaly that's worth mentioning. Despite all of the changes to the Republic command structure over the years, we have now broken down everything we know about it in current canon and how it works. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this.